So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing. I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
Welcome back to Drinking the Movies. What are we drinking today?
We have a fantastic Northwest Pilsner from Hellbent Brewing Company, which is still open, even if they are behind a barricade.
I've had this many times before, I believe. Always good.
We have. It turned a little bit more mild here, a little bit more rainy, overcast. No more sun, so instead of getting a hazy, sunny IPA, we went with the more fallish Pilsner. And it's perfect.
It hits the spot. What movies are we talking about today?
We have Corey Finley's follow-up to Thoroughbreds, Bad Education, as well as Pablo Larraín's Emma, who's most notably directed Jackie, starring Natalie Portman, which is one of the best films of the last decade. And then we have Robert Downey Sr.'s most famous and most infamous film, Putney Swope, which I believe we're quite thrilled to attempt to figure out how to have a conversation about.
Very pumped to talk about it. Should maybe start by saying that Emma was playing for only 24 hours on Mubi, the streaming service, so we'll talk about that one without spoilers.
For the first time in our extended history, that's the one and only. But first, as always, first impressions. We got a couple Dev Patel titles today. The Personal History of David Copperfield and The Green Knight. Let's start with The Green Knight.
Let's do it.
Tell me a tale of yourself, so that I might know thee.
I have none to tell.
Yet. You have none to tell yet.
I fear I'm not meant for greatness.
We all fear, but fear can be a gift.
Do not waste this.
All right, we just watched the trailer for David Lowery's The Green Knight. What do you think?
I think it looks like a David Lowery film, which means I'm very excited. I guess under the surface, I'm interested to see how breathy or full-bodied Alicia Vikander's role will be. She's one of the better actresses working today that isn't getting very many opportunities. And when I think back to what Lowery did for Rooney Mara, in kind of defining one of the roles that we see her as, I think Side Effects and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo are also very defining roles for Rooney, and Ex Machina is incredibly defining for Alicia Vikander. I'd be interested to see if there will be that type of room for her role here to kind of define herself a little bit more in this surreal fantasy film that I'm very excited about. How about you?
When I think Rooney Mara, I always go Carol myself. To me,
That's
one of the
movie that
roles.
I really don't like, and I'm on the outside looking in. I've tried.
Fair enough. Yeah, you said it looks very much like a David Lowery movie. I would agree. It also looks very much like an A24 movie. I don't think they even needed to put their name on it. You know it's A24 from the artisanal kind of aesthetic it's got going on, which I think looks cool. It looks like a production that's maybe a little too ornamental or decorative for my taste. Like I hope it's not airless, but you know, I like the change of pace for Lowery in a way into something fantasy ish. So yeah, I'm intrigued.
Well, didn't he do forgive me if I'm wrong, Pete's Dragon?
You're right. I didn't see Pete's Dragon, but yeah, I think you're right.
So I think that maybe fantasy is something that he's drawn to. Even A Ghost Story to me is a fantasy about a specter who doesn't move, essentially.
For sure. Yeah, maybe it's just the symbols that he's working with, right? Where here we have creatures and knights and dragons. That's what I think of when I say fantasy sometimes.
When you say ornamental, I also... It gives me the impression, the florality of... It's at least reminiscent to me of Midsommar in 100%. Some ways. I'd be curious to see if they're using the same set dresser or any of the same crews as far as staging and framing there.
Seems entirely plausible.
I think we're both pretty excited for a David Lowery film that still says summer on the trailer. I can only assume that they made summer of one of the years of the 2020s. I don't expect this will come out anytime soon. I think First Cow is going to be the first thing slated, and we still don't have a definitive date for that, last I checked. So we'll be sitting on our hands for a while waiting for this one. But it's a trailer that we can watch and talk about, so here it is.
It will come out in the future.
On to the personal history of David Copperfield.
My boyhood days seem now like a scarcely believable fiction.
London is full of wonders and wickedness. And it's ours, David, to go wherever we choose. Well, I'm not down there. Creditors make that road impossible. 2 tailors and a most unreasonable muffin man. Copperfield!
Your mama is ill.
How old is she?
Very ill.
Very ill.
Very ill.
Very ill?
Dangerously ill.
She's dead.
We're very sorry.
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for Armando Iannucci's The Personal History of David Copperfield. What do you think?
I'm sort of modestly interested in this. I'm not super familiar with Armando Iannucci, although I loved The Death of Stalin. I think that's really the only thing of his that I've seen. It looks very smart in its humor, but as a comedic literary adaptation, that's something I normally get super excited about. I also should say that I don't necessarily love Dev Patel now that we've centered our first impressions on him. So it doesn't necessarily add to my excitement, but I don't majorly dislike him either. No, he just doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Slumdog and Lion, he does a lot for me.
There you go.
In those 2 films.
And how does he strike you here?
Interesting. It reminds me greatly of the, I don't know what year version or even remember the actor's name, but it reminds me of the extended VHS version of Gulliver's Travels that I used to rent from the library when I was a kid. It has that quality of fantastical realism on this journey that I really respond to. It also has those, cast of characters that mark the journey along the way and what feels to be fun comedic banter. So I think this will be a film that I'll not only enjoy, but that it would be interesting for me to watch at many points in my life because these fantastical comedies that are travel comedies, essentially, in the fantastical realm, I've just always responded to and been gripped by. There's something about it that I just like. So I think I'm going to genuinely and pleasantly like this.
Yeah, definitely interested enough to check it out. Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. We recently joined as members, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
On to Bad Education.
This is a very real crime here, a theft of taxpayer money.
The sum total is $250,000.
What?
Oh,
Jesus,
$250,000.
Everything's fine.
You can't jump the gun here, not when there's this much at stake. We need to know what we're dealing with.
Frank.
After everything we've worked for. Frank, to get this far. Frank.
You have nothing to worry about. Frank's gonna fix this.
This kind of behavior, it's cruel. It's sociopathic.
Sociopathic? I'm ashamed of my actions. I'm ashamed of myself. There's no excuse for it.
Well, the sociopathy.
Yeah, right.
If a scandal gets out, we will lose everything. Some people, they'll do the most horrible things.
As you mentioned, this is directed by Corey Finley, who previously directed Thoroughbreds, which was his feature debut. I love this movie. I thought it was very sharply scripted, very precisely directed. What about you? Where are you at on this one?
I just about completely disagree with your assessment, but the direction point I will give lots of ground there and say it does remind me of some of the best parts of Wes Anderson's staging and framing. However, the scenes that are staged and framed and my level of interest in them is far less than an Anderson film.
Not sure I see the Anderson comparison. He's like so meticulous and detailed, and they're so whimsical. I'm surprised by that connection.
The connection's more about the level of meticulousness that I'm feeling in the staging and the angle of, say, the scene where he's essentially playing George Bush reading a storybook while something terrible is happening and the door opens and he's interrupted. It's an incredibly boring backdrop, but it is meticulously framed and very I think it just earns or deserves a level of comparison to what I think of when I think of great staging and framing. And its lack of whimsicalness is why I disliked it, and also its lack of a through line, even though it's the film that we're talking about with the most through lines this week, where it's the easiest plot to follow. I didn't ever feel attached to a character, which would be my main criticism. In Thoroughbreds, I became attached to characters, with Anton Yelchin being a very endearing villain. And here, I never really cared for anyone at all.
Interesting. We can say that it is set in upstate New York. It's based on a true story about a couple public school district administrators, a superintendent and his assistant superintendent, I think, who embezzled millions of dollars from their school district. To me, the clear theme is kind of one about temptation and greed, and how once you're getting away with something that you shouldn't be doing, how easy it can be to how tempting it can be to only further indulge yourself to the point that inevitably you'll be caught, and just the slippery slope that greediness can be.
So you're saying the student journalist isn't the villain?
That is correct.
Radical take.
Hot take.
She devalued a lot of property for people.
That she did. I think it's very witty. I think the satire is really compelling. I think it's all in the craft, in the score, and how it is approaching these characters who I think are totally fully realized. And it's not cartoonish in the way satire can be. It's in that kind of phony grandeur in the score. And I think these ideas are great stuff. And I would have thought this reminded me a lot of Alexander Payne and Election specifically. I think there's all kinds of great stuff here.
I find it empty, and I don't want to use the word, but it's something like the word boorish. Like, it's just like there's no real substance to what I'm seeing. It seems very cut out realism put on a popsicle stick, acting out a perfectly meticulously pre-planned guideline for that popsicle stick to take. Hugh Jackman is doing great craft work, but I'm not left feeling moved or impacted or intrigued I don't have any emotional resonance in any way to any facet of this film.
I've 100% responded to it. We're coming from very different angles. I thought Hugh Jackman was very good. I really like how he suggests the charisma of this guy. He also hints at this flamboyant side of the character. You see that in the way he can sip his smoothie that he gets every morning. I think Allison Janney is hilarious. And I think between those two characters and the young blonde woman who also decides to put her hand in the cookie jar, you get a full sort of arc between the three of them of what it looks like to take advantage of an opportunity. And I think that's kind of brilliant that it would be so formulaic if this was sort of a start to finish thing with, say, Hugh Jackman, and we saw him at the beginning maybe dip his hand into the public school, into their cash, for the first time. Instead, we see that in this young girl who's so nervous about doing it at first, and then is slowly kind of emboldened by it. Allison Janney takes it for granted that she'll never be caught. I think between the three of them, you get a really full picture of what this temptation would have felt like. And I think that's what's so great about it, is that these are all very human characters. It's interested in their fallibility, not just skewering them for what they did. I think there's great realization of these characters.
I don't disagree with you. All I can say is I didn't feel any of what you're talking about at all at any point during any part of the film, except for maybe Ray Romano's character, who I think is the most endearing and emotionally mappable character for me to grip onto. I don't feel like anything Hugh Jackman ever does is real at some level. Like, he's just a guy playing a part, which I think is part of what makes the performance good. I gave this a 50 roughly, like a 2.5 out of 5. I don't feel really strongly against it. I'm still very interested in Corey Finley developing in the future. I love the delicious moments of Allison Janney being a crooked crony. Those are fun, but she's not a mappable character that I can be on board with, much like in I, Tonya, when she's not a mappable character I can be on board with. She's just playing a role that I can find delicious and have fun, but she's not bringing me, I guess, a side to be on. And sometimes as a viewer, I need to be on someone's side if the craft isn't enrapturing to me, and I didn't find the craft enrapturing either. There's just so much that I didn't care for, and I didn't hate anything. So it's the worst, most boring hot take from me, because I'm not like, I don't hate it. I think that you should watch it because you'll probably like it. It's a fine middle of the road film. It's better than Fahrenheit 451 from HBO last year, which is at least something, but it's not meaning. I'd rather watch Cher 3 times in a row than watch this one more time.
I had a completely different response to The Craft. I think it's one of the best looking movies of the year. It's immediately apparent that it's shot on film. I think the colors are super rich and the depth of the color is fantastic. I think it's surprisingly dark. Like, this is not a brightly lit high school satire. I think there's a lot of black that's in sync with the corruption that we're learning about. I think he makes this as cinematic as you can to shoot this in a high school in fairly unexciting locations. And I think he's creating tension with, these tracking shots and careful framing when we're seeing in the corner of a frame the ceiling of the schools, leaking water, these short-sighting shots when there's tension between Hugh Jackman and Ray Romano. Like, I think it totally proves that he's got what it takes as a director. And what's really interesting to me is that my understanding is that he started out as a playwright, and that he originally conceived of Thoroughbreds as a play and then realized it had cinematic potential.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
And then for him to go on and just kind of be a gun for hire on this one, where he hadn't penned the script, he's just taking control of the camera. It shows that he's totally got it, that he has kind of made that leap from writer to film artist, and he's using grammar to tell this story. I think is just kind of phenomenal.
I forget what the exact line is, but I believe Matt Singer made the point that it's clear that he can be a gun for hire, but whether or not he's an auteur, the jury is still out. That essentially sums up where I'm at with him. Like, I would agree he directed fine. He got very good performances for these roles. At some level, the material clearly just doesn't work for me. And I'm kind of at the point where I just accept that. I don't think that that this is a movie that I would ever feel passionate about saying really negative things. Where there's other movies where like I'll go to bat and say that like they're just terrible. This isn't something where I feel comfortable saying that. All I can say is I had zero personal resonance with the piece. And like Matt Singer said, I'm still not thoroughly convinced that he is auteur the way that I am with Eggers or Astor, who I put, him in that class of filmmakers coming up right now. And I was looking for more. Right now, he's, for me personally, last in the tier of those up-and-coming directors, because I'm just more interested in what they have to say as artists, because I find them to be auteurs.
Yeah, I definitely think he is in this up-and-coming class of directors. To me, he's better at working with ideas than those directors might be. I think those guys might be attracted to, images that I find more appealing, and like genres that are just kind of inherently more exciting, right? Something like The Lighthouse or Midsummer, like...
Well, Thoroughbreds is incredibly thrilling.
For sure. But, my problem with something like The Lighthouse is that it kind of feels like it's form in search of meaning. Like, I don't find that movie to be very engaging. And yeah, I do think there is a sense in which auteurs are... to be a true auteur, you both have to kind of have conceived of the idea and be bringing it to the screen yourself. But, also if you just think about, the classic sort of French New Wave definition of director as artist, throughout film history, great directors haven't written their own material and they put their own
stamp on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you just totally get that with the movement of the camera and him, doing things like short sighting and, techniques that are instantly reminiscent of Thoroughbreds.
Yeah, they're reminiscent. The one, major piece of criticism I have for Thoroughbreds is it feels as if it is a film presented through a diorama. Like, it is just so dioramic that, like, I can tell you the living room, and you can remember the couch with the love seats placed, and the TV glow, and them sitting there at night, and the way that those windows are, and just how rich that... Like, there's a diorama quality to it that I wouldn't equate to Hereditary, which is also kind of a diorama.
That's so dioramic. She builds dioramas.
Yes, it is very dioramic, but it's not as artifice, I guess. Hereditary feels more lived in. Thoroughbreds feels more artifice, more like a landmark that has this action taking place rather than an action, or rather than like a piece of the story itself. I don't know. There's some sort of a disconnect. I wish that I knew how to place it better, but I agree. That's why I was making the point that they're both dioramic, but the dioramic qualities of Hereditary are more unembellished or more naturalistic to the entire storytelling. The house literally becomes a part of the narrative at one point with the fire in Hereditary. And in Thoroughbreds, sound essentially is our main cue in that house. The house itself is never really that lived in. It just feels like a place that they navigated the hallways in. And that's kind of something that I don't like in film from creators, and that's something Bad Education did, is it felt like there were just players in hallways rather than the hallways speaking to me in the film. And that's just like a personal taste thing that, I could be totally arbitrarily wrong on.
Well, I don't want to sidetrack us too much talking about Thoroughbreds, but I will confess that is so backwards of how I read those movies. To me, Hereditary, which I love, that was on my top 10 of the year it came out. To me, that is like defined by its dollhouse aesthetic, and that's what's so great about it. I have trouble imagining Thoroughbreds being the one that strikes you as too diorama-like. Interesting.
It's almost like it's a two-dimensionality of the diorama rather than a three-dimensionality of the diorama. It's not its presentation, it's just something fundamental about it. I wish that I could be more distinctive about what I'm saying, but it's just an intangible feeling that I have very strongly without any good way of expressing it.
Fair enough. So, completely different responses. Do you think it handles any of its themes well? Do any of these strike you as well articulated?
The thing that I brought up earlier with when Ray Romano brings up the point about how everybody's land values has increased because the school value increased, and if you do that, you're going to be basically destabilizing this group of people who've moved into this neighborhood. It's very important because that is the ground level of power that this has. That is the entire purpose of schools to government to tax-paying citizens. At some point of power structure, that's all it is. And I found just the clearness in which they communicated that to be great. I really liked that point and wish that they would have doubled down and made that point about the colleges that are just as corrupt as the school is. So to me, it's more of a top-down thing where the colleges are this corrupt, so you have to make the school this corrupt in order to succeed into the corrupted colleges. And just fixing the thing at the bottom of the food chain isn't going to change the top of the food chain.
Yeah, I would agree. There's no real comment about the next stage in these kids' lives, but for me, the movie is clear about this not being specifically applicable to public schools, because we get that character of the father of the student reporter who's been let go from an investment bank because of insider trading, and it sounds like he didn't actually participate, but he knew of it and just didn't do anything. So for me, it was easy enough to give the movie the benefit of the doubt and see, like, I don't think it would argue with you that there are other institutions that are similarly corrupt, because it's interested in just the human nature at work here, and how when people first indulge in that temptation, how slippery that can be, and how tempting it is to just only further take when you know you can get away with it.
Yeah, I just didn't respond. I can't strongly disagree with you. All I can say is I just didn't respond to any of that stuff, and it sounds very true.
Fair enough.
I wish I had more passion for this. I just was really middle of the road, disappointed, didn't feel strongly for what I was watching, didn't feel strongly when I finished it. The more I talk about it, the more lukewarm I am.
It tends to happen sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have our biggest division of the episode out of the way. I think.
Maybe the biggest division thus far this year.
In a while, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's Bad Education, the last movie we'll talk about where we can follow beginning to end.
It only gets a little more challenging to follow from here, yeah.
On to Pablo Larraín's Emma.
Si mi cuerpo es real, mi lengua es real.
Es tu culpa que no hayamos podido soportarlo.
Como la cara de tu hermana.
tu culpa que a mí me duela todo el cuerpo.
Yo no debo ni.
Y es tu culpa que la gente nos mire en la calle como si hubiéramos asfixiado a un perro con una bolsa de plástico.
Vamos a estar bien tú y yo, ¿no?
Estamos bien.
¿Sí?
Sí, estamos bien. No necesitamos nada. La gente nos quiere.
Sí.
So, as we mentioned in our intro, this was just streaming for 24 hours on Mubi yesterday. So we both watched this last night. Still very fresh. I had very high hopes for this movie.
I did not.
No?
I had very middle of the road hopes. I've never seen Neruda, never seen No. Jackie is one of the most unique pieces of film I think I can point to in the last decade. I feel like it might be something of a one-trick pony, even though that's a terrible metaphor for that. It might just be his crowning achievement, and there might be no good reason for it, to explain or break down in cultural context. It might just be that smashing hit where Natalie Portman had all this passion to do it. He had all this energy to get it perfectly framed and directed, and it might be his crowning achievement of his career permanently. That's how I went into the film. This is going to be a step down.
I have also only seen Jackie, which I liked. I don't think I liked it quite as much as you did, but I was just naturally attracted to the images of this movie. I thought the trailer just looked dope.
It does. It's
right,
a lot more active.
No one's talking about this movie without referencing things like climax. Where I've seen references to Trey Edward Schultz too because of the sort of maximalism of waves. That all was immediately attractive to me.
Yes, I would not think of Trey Edward Schultz in any way when I think about this film, but I guess the close-ups and the really charged emotional dialogue between these characters could be reminiscent to Waves, but that is such a different operating procedure of a film in which you actually know who the characters are when you're seeing them, who they're talking to, why they're talking about this. You can follow the dialogue chain. Whereas Emma's a little bit more hazy.
Yeah, I think it was, and I think I would agree that it just, I think I understood that connection in terms of them being very overtly stylized films.
That's fair.
Very, arguably ostentatious in their craft. There's a lot of cinematic brio on display here.
Yes, I love Trey, and I don't love this movie the way that I love Trey's movies, so I'm giving a little bit of pushback, but I think that's probably fair. There's a little bit of the most quaint or nice way of saying garish to both of those films.
Yeah, I would agree, and I liked Waves better than this movie too, which I am mixed on.
I'm slightly above mixed. I'm generally positive on it, but I'm very mixed on how to communicate that.
Fair enough. It's set in modern day Chile. It centers on a couple whose relationship is sort of falling apart after they return.
See, now we already disagree. I feel like it's not about a couple. It's about a large polyamorous group of people who are all lovers or something. And that's where I start losing the thread of or something. I don't know the definitions of these relationships, but we keep hearing that they all sleep in the same bed together, although we never see all of them in the bed together, which was something that I was waiting for a distinctive understanding of these characters. Do you disagree? Was it more about the couple by themselves to you?
I was mostly just trying to sort of establish the inciting plot mechanics, I suppose.
My bad.
I think that's what kicks this movie off, is that it centers on a couple whose relationship falls apart after they return a son they have adopted to social services because of his Polo, his name, because of extreme misbehavior and violence. He has done some quite heinous things
involving fire.
Yes. And hurting animals, all kinds of bad stuff. And then it's subsequently sort of the fallout on the relationship, and specifically her.
She is the center.
The titular Emma. But yeah, kind of then getting back to what we were saying about style, it is highly stylized, with very, very colorful. There's hardly a quiet moment. There's always this electronic wash of a score, and there's tons of cross-cutting between dance and the drama itself, because she's a dancer and he's a choreographer.
There's also cross-cut between Emma and her various partners.
Correct. She becomes she sort of embarks on this trip where she's taking up new partners, men and women, spending more time with her friends, trying new styles of dance that her husband, soon to be ex-husband, looks down on. I just found that all of the ideas and drama was just sort of snuffed out by the style, which I just found to be too overheated. But what about you?
I feel similar things to that, but my counterpoint would be I felt like the style was so interesting that it's very disappointing that the rest of the film wasn't as interesting.
100%. Superficially speaking, I think the surfaces are great. I think it's an intoxicating movie in its look and movement and sound, but I think this movie takes itself way more seriously than I can take it. There's a humorlessness to it that I was sort of on the outside looking in on, because it seems a little much.
But then we have these weird moments of feeling like she's aware of how funny this stuff is, particularly moments where she's wearing the flamethrower apparatus or shooting the fire hose, which are the two pieces of elements that we see her controlling. She's also, what I would say metaphorically or mythically, this is a story to me that is a refreshment of the idea of the devouring mother, which is something that creates but also destroys. And I believe that this film is representative of a mother who creates but also destroys. And similar to The Invisible Life, the opening sequence in this film, although much shorter, completely defines the film for me, in which we see a stoplight that has already been lit on fire, dripping onto the cement and ceasing to function. Stoplights essentially bring order into chaos and dictate what you should do. And this has been lit on fire and is dripping onto the cement of the city. And to me, this film is about that loss of what to do and kind of lighting order on fire in a way to make the city give you what you want. And I really responded to the iconography of the film, which is part of its, luxurious garishness, you could say. But it's those moments that we were talking about in which we have like super high amounts of crosscuts of dialogue and close-up where we don't know who she's talking to now. And it just gets a little bit oversaturated. It's a little bit much. There's no grip for me as the viewer to feel really passionately on her side or against her, which I think makes the movie suffer.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't know that I necessarily want to be on her side or be against her. I think I like that she is a complicated character, but that I just don't think the very sort of overt symbolism interacts all that well with the sort of recognizable human drama at the center, whether it's the relationship between Emma and Gael Garcia Bernal, who plays her husband, or her sort of, like you were saying, to me it's like she's wanting to just burn herself to the ground and sort of reinvent herself out of the ashes and take up this new kind of dance and start fresh. It seems to be working more with big ideas while also kind of putting recognizable human beings in front of us that it doesn't dig into in that much detail. Like, I just feel like these are kind of constructs. I don't know. I just could not connect with these characters in any very meaningful way.
Yeah, they do feel like constructs, and I think that might be a little bit on purpose, just to iron out previously, I don't necessarily want to be on her side or against her, but I do like movies where I feel one of those things, especially when it's really challenging, where I'm on someone's side and someone else isn't, right? When we talk about The Lodge, are you on Riley Keough's side at the end or not? Right? Like, that's fun to deliberate on. And there's lots of films like that, right? Like, whose side are you on in the first half of Waves? Right? There's really interesting, complex characters that beget that debate. And to me, she doesn't have that level of interest where I feel passionately towards defending her or disagreeing with her. And that, I think, would be of value here. Maybe I'm wrong and it's better to absolutely have no mappable liking or disliking to her, but I just feel very mixed and ungripped by my perspective of this character.
Yeah. I think we responded similarly to the same things. It's just a matter of characterizing it differently. That's still strikes me as too binary, as like the picking of teams somehow. I don't know that I quite would have described my response in quite the same way. It was more just about how the content is articulated by the form, and how this sort of seems lacking in specifics in a way. This becomes sort of just like this hedonistic odyssey for Emma as she starts, sleeping around with all kinds of different people and hooking up with different people in rooms that are, wherever they are always lit like a club. And I'm not really anywhere. I'm not in any way familiar with what's inside her head, which is more of the problem for me, less than like whether or not I'm rooting for her or against her, I guess.
Yeah, it's not. I wish that I could once again express this a little bit more detailed. It's not that I want to pick a team, it's that I like the feeling of passion, which means wanting to pick a team. And I have no passion for this character either way. I have no instinct to defend or rally against. I have no care in general about the outcome. I don't feel like she should get her kid back, but I also don't feel strongly about her not getting her kid back. And I think that to me just points to a little bit of empty characterization, in which
Agreed.
I maybe would prefer to have a little bit stronger emotion. And I particularly like when the strong emotions are mixed and someone else has a totally opposite perspective, right? Someone either loves Cedric Diggory or thinks he's weak in Harry Potter. Someone loves Draco Malfoy or thinks that he should have been, given a chance at the end for redemption in a bigger way than he was. To me, there's something of great value in characters like that, and she just doesn't have that level. Where maybe Gael does a little bit. He does seem genuinely remorseful and maybe willing to entertain the idea of reggaeton being meaningful by the end, which, I don't know. It's a weird movie that I feel very empty about its characters in general, but really responded to the iconography.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, at the end of the day, I might still recommend this movie just because I think it's a cool watch. And I think it sounds great, and the dance is great. Like, it is super stylish. It's a fun movie to watch. I just think it's, I think we're on the same page, maybe, that there's just sort of a lack of real meaning here. Or I don't know. It could have dialed back the symbolism a little bit and just developed these people a little bit.
Yeah, because its symbolism doesn't really do anything. To me, it's the iconography that is the best, which is when it's showing inanimate objects beautifully stylized or inanimate objects beautifully lit on fire in a nightscape or something, and that those things aren't necessarily metaphors so much as just brilliant shots. And if the stuff around that could have been meaningful, so that you're arriving at these moments after meaningful dialogue or meaningful interactions, then maybe they could have built, but instead they're just kind of landmarks of beauty along a mixed bridge.
I would completely agree. Maybe I'm just okay at, like, accepting it as a 2-hour stylized dance film / music video, and I'm good with that. On those terms, it's pretty sweet, but not one that I'm particularly moved by.
Yeah, I would never discourage someone from watching it, but I'd also be like, if you thought Emma was good, you should wait to watch Climax, because it's the best.
Yeah, I think very fair point of comparison, and I don't think Climax takes itself anywhere as seriously as this movie does.
I mean, what would you do if you couldn't dance? Suicide. Pretty serious, but yeah, its formalism isn't nearly as serious. It's a lot more dance macabre, embracing the idea of the lens format genre of horror while also incorporating a level of dance to the camera choreography. Whereas this, as good as it looked, it didn't have that interesting of camera movement, which I was a little bit surprised by.
Yeah, I think I kind of liked the camera work. I think it was pretty slick. For the most part, I mean, that's kind of what kept me actually pretty entertained. That plus the neon light and the score. I mean, I thought that was all pretty sweet, but yeah, fair enough.
I think it was. I just think it lacked the next level that I look for in dance genre of film, in which the camera feels like a participating player. I think it was well shot and everything, but it wasn't its own character in the film, almost. It's a beautiful looking film, though, so there's only so much I can criticize. It's just, I like that pirouetting, upside down, Kubrickian nightmare hellscape that Noé put on camera.
Yeah, to me in Climax, there's a lot more distance from the characters. Like, you get just static shots where you're just listening to them, just watching them talk, watching them dance, and I think that distance is pretty key in letting you consider these people and what it is they think and are talking about. Whereas here, I think the craft in Emma is very immersive. It's trying to be very immersive, but there's not that much air in it to really consider the different angles of these characters, I guess. I don't know.
I feel like my cat might disagree with what you're saying.
She is not a fan, apparently.
Tearing up that post as you talk. I'm a little bit more passionate about this than Bad Education, but this is just another movie that I feel mixed about expressing, but I'm generally positive on it. When I think about its iconography, I like a lot of the still images. I would hang them up in my home. The car on fire, the streetlight on fire, shooting the flamethrower into the night sky, shooting the fire hose into the daylight sky. There's some beautiful shots in front of the sun. The rooftop sequence is very good looking for a music video style. But at the end, that's all there is. And that, in and of itself, is a bit of a disappointment.
I would agree.
Do you have a favorite scene?
Do I have a favorite scene? Gosh, do you have anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, it's boring and I've already talked about it, but it's that first shot of the street light being burnt and watching the drips fall and then getting the pan down and seeing the plastic liquid still on fire in the street.
Fair enough. What's kind of funny is that this is partly about Emma embracing this new form of dance, reggaeton, which is, sort of the new thing, the hot new thing, and this is partly about kind of old ways versus new, right? Gael Garcia Bernal's character totally rejects what they're doing, and ironically, I think I vastly prefer his style.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the openings sequences, which I think are on the cover of the movie, with this big orb in this black room that looks, like a star up close or something like that. pretty great. I think they should stick with his methodology.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things that I was confused about. And I guess that's contemporary Chile. This is reggaeton is taking over, and it's, you know, revolting against the new, and that's essentially what this film is. It's a revolt. And, you know, new children, you know, all that's wrapped in here. I think it's a little bit mixed and a little bit empty because it's trying to do stuff without sincerely getting there. But his dances are the good dances. Those are the things that I would pay hundreds of dollars to go see downtown in a theater performed. And what they're doing, I just did not care about, really, most of the time. Like, they're doing it well, but that's not personally a dance that I find gripping, moving, or enjoyable at all, really.
We probably just lost all of our Chilean teenage listeners who are embracing reggaeton right now.
That's a significant part of our audience. Right. I hope they'll forgive us.
We have to hang up the mics.
Maybe they'll extend us some of the better beats that were not in that film, so we can attempt to enjoy reggaeton. I'm sure I'd
Send
enjoy
us your videos.
Dancing it. Yes, I'm sure I'd enjoy dancing it myself, but less thrilling to watch. So your favorite scene was?
Oh, just some of the opening sequences where we're watching his routines in front of that.
I wasn't sure if we got
that.
Yeah. Turns out we got it. On to Robert Downey Sr., the Prince, is Putney Swope.
That's it. 1 vote for Elias, 1 vote for Bissinger, 9 votes for Swope.
Swope! You don't have to accept. It's a terrible job. Don't take it, Swope.
The man's been elected and you voted for him.
We all voted for him because we thought no one else would vote for him. Putney Swope is the new chairman of this board, and I will defend that mistake with my life.
Michael, this is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Is this instantly in your pantheon?
This is instantly in my personal pantheon. I was watching this with a friend. When it ended, he said, "No, it can't end. It needs to go forever." And that is exactly how I feel, because it is so perfect and so disregarding of what you care or what your perspective is or what you want from it. It just does what it wants, and it does it so sincerely and also so sarcastically. It's so rebellious. I love it.
I'm right there with you. I thought this movie was hilarious. It's our one not new release of the episode. This came out in 1969.
I talked you into it because of Bad Education. The idea was board switching or something like that. I actually, in hindsight, think it has a lot more in common with Emma in the sense of rebellion. But go on.
Yeah, I will not have too many connections to make between this and Emma or Bad Education, but thought this was outrageously funny. It is about an ad agency whose chairman croaks in a board meeting in the first 10 minutes of the film or so, and the rest of the board members vote on the sole...
How many syllables? How many syllables?
I actually don't remember
How
that
many
joke.
syllables? How many
put that in
syllables?
context for me?
When the chairman dies, he's stuttering. And an old man at the table is asking, how many syllables is the word you're trying to say? Over and over and over. And then he dies. They have the entire conversation. He's still there, asking the dead corpse who's face down on the table how many syllables it is.
That makes much more sense now. I do really regret not watching this closer to recording. This was the first one I watched in our lineup this week, which was a mistake. But yeah, chairman of the ad agency croaks, and the rest of the board votes on a new chairman. They all vote for Putney Swope, the
That's
one.
Not true.
Okay, there are a couple other people who vote for others. Many of them vote for Putney Swope, the one black guy on the board, thinking nobody else will vote for him, and he inadvertently gets elected as head of the ad agency, and he changes the name of the company to
Truth and Soul. But essentially what happens, the lines are, I'm not going to rock the boat. Rocking the boat's something or other. I don't remember that line. I'm going to sink the boat. And the next thing we see is all the white people are gone besides one, and the entire board is black now. And one really fun anecdote that I found out listening to interviews with Robert Downey is they were in like the Chase boardroom or something, like a real boardroom in New York that like they never should have been in, but the producer had an in, and they weren't allowed to leave. So everybody was in there the whole scene because they shot that all at once. So the black people that are later in the scene, those characters are all hiding under the table during the white board meeting. And then all the white characters are hiding underneath the boardroom after it switches. And I find that just incredible.
That is a great anecdote, and to me that just speaks to the kind of scrappiness of the film that I find
punk.
Yeah, that I find very, very appealing. This is not terribly polished, but it's very unrestrained and uninhibited, and kind of just a go for broke satire of all kinds of things. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. I think the jokes are just coming like one after another. There's really not a dull moment here. I think like 95% of these scenes are hilarious. I love this.
You said lack of polish, and I feel like that's the perfect description. Its lack of polish is the same exact thing that makes it so incredibly charming. It's that. It's if it would have been more polished and more nuanced and more, heady, I feel like it would have got lost in the weeds, and you wouldn't feel that level of sincere fuck you in which the poster depicts, right? It's Putney Swope is its poster is a hand holding up a middle finger, and the middle finger is a woman. And that this is such a meandering, difficult film to talk about. I'll just pick a random point and throw a dart at it and point it out.
Do it.
The main character in the film Freaks is the character who plays Mimeo, the president.
Oh, so funny.
And that is one of the funnier scenes. There's also the photographer, whose name I'm now forgetting, who just continuously shows up, completely unrecognized, flipping through his photo book, saying, these are pictures for Colgate, these are pictures for so-and-so, so-and-so, and he talks himself down to $350 and then says, no, I'll do it for free. And Putney says, I can get anyone for free. Get out of here.
It's just, one thing after another. One of my favorite scenes was when President Mimeo, who is a little person, is with his wife and
who's his sister.
Is it his sister?
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
His sister sleeping together?
Yes, and his sister.
Is that part of the joke?
His sister also played his fiance in the film Freaks.
Oh, interesting. Got it. Oh, you mean like the actor or something? Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought you meant that they were the characters were siblings.
No,
I was like, pretty sure they were husband and wife.
I believe they were circus actors together, and then they became actors after they graduated out of the circus.
Understood. It's when the two of them are with two of his advisors, I think they are, one of whom is bald, and the bald guy makes a joke that they start laughing at, and then they just can't stop laughing. And it's just, just utterly contagious. I wasn't laughing at first, and then I started laughing, and then I was really laughing.
That's exactly what happened to me, and it's because he asks if you've ever heard a joke, and then he waits a quarter of a second and starts telling the joke as if your reaction to whether or not you've heard or if you want to hear a joke matters. There's so many levels of absurdism to the comedy and it's so dignified because it isn't holier than thou. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it so regal in a way. That stuff just can't be unless it feels this scrappy and this slapped together sincerely.
Yeah. I feel like there are kind of different angles to it. It's satirizing different things, whether, race obviously being one, but, advertising and consumerism. But some of just the workplace stuff was the funniest to me. Like, one of my favorite bits was when a white guy comes to Putney to talk about his salary, and he says, I want a raise because I'm making less than everybody. And Putney says, well, if I raise your salary, I'm going to have to raise everybody else's salary. And then we'll be right back to where we started. And you'll be making less money. And he said, well, Putney, I really hadn't thought of that. And he said, and that's why you make less money. You don't think. Easily my biggest laugh of this movie.
Mr. Swope, I do exactly the same job as the other executives, but I don't make as much money as they do. I don't think that's right.
If I give you a raise, everybody's gonna want a raise. And if I give them a raise, they'll still be making more money than you. And we'll be right back where we started.
Are you ready for another anecdote?
What do you got?
This movie, Robert made because he worked at a advertising firm. And this was kind of to provide some therapy for him to get over that. Those lines, my understanding, according to him, is that those are all real lines that were said to him and his friend when they went in because he found out that his African-American coworker was making less money than him for doing the same job. So they went in to tell him, and that's the answer that they received. And he just put exactly that into the film because it was such bullshit.
Yeah, you think it's all very absurd, and then you find out it's true, which only makes it kind of that more outrageous.
Yeah. It's a film that also, gosh, what's that version of Film Spotting that isn't Film Spotting?
Like one of the other podcasts?
Yeah, the one from Tasha Robinson, Genevieve Koski.
Oh, the Next Picture Show?
Yeah, they paired this year or two back with, now I'm forgetting the name of it. Lakeith Stanfield, Tessa Thompson, Armie Hammer, Boots Riley.
Sorry to bother you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I thought that was a perfect pairing, or for someone who's not aware of what Putney Swope is. It's basically a film in which there's white voiceover for the black actors, and it's a criticism of racism in the country, and it feels very, very similar. Apparently Boots Riley had never seen this film, and I don't know if he's seen it since, but was kind of up in arms about people comparing it because he'd never seen it. So anybody that has seen Sorry to Bother You and liked it, I would say would probably love this. Because I love this, and I was mixed more on Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah,
but I still think it's good.
I would happily do a double feature of those, and I'd probably like Sorry to Bother You even more, like in the context of this film.
I have to imagine, right?
Yeah. It was ironic. This was the first movie I ever watched on Tubi, which is an ad-supported service.
Mm-hmm.
The irony of that was not lost on me. Since advertising is obviously a big source of the satire here too, the clips from the actual ads that the agency puts out, completely hilarious. Those all land for you?
Absolutely. The one thing that I really respond to about the form here is that I believe the entire film is shot in black and white, except for when they're shooting on the sound stages for the ads. Obviously, I can't appreciate the quality of the color, as I can't see it, but I love the idea of the most vibrant parts of the film being the ads as far as visual context goes, and having it be the most flamboyant, empty, money-grubbing part of the film as well. I really responded to that idea a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just the idea of the absurd ways in which products are sold to us, are marketed to us, is just spot on. They're all super funny and just outrageous.
You gonna get some face off?
It started last weekend at the L. Howard game. to have pimples, but I made them disappear.
He faced life with face off. It made his skin so clear.
A pimple is simple if you treat your pimples right.
My man uses face off. He's really out of sight, and so are his pimples.
I mean, pretty convincing anecdote that kid had. It worked for him.
Put some bread on it.
Lots of good stuff. Yeah, I don't know that I have too much more. Just super funny. It's fantastic.
It's a wide film that's kind of hard to pour in on. I guess, what do you think about the overhead shot of New York when we begin?
Great shot. Probably one of the more striking shots in the whole movie. Taken from, like a helicopter or something.
I have to assume, yeah. One of those very early overhead shots that I think I've only seen shots like that at that point in time from Herzog, maybe? I think that's the only other person I can think of putting a camera in a helicopter giving me the crazy shots. Like, there's other helicopter shots, but they're not that artisanal, I guess.
Yeah. It's a striking opening. And then I think the rest of the whole film is, like, indoors in the workplace. Probably threw some money at that opening shot. Worth it.
Gosh, there's just so much. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface of putting the money in the fucking vault. Clear thing, but shooting it in there like it's a basketball.
Very satisfying.
How that all gets lit on fire and he takes his money. Like, I guess, what do you think of Putney? He's a complex character who's also completely empty, right? Like, you don't really get a sense for who he is or why he's doing this or who he was before he became the board manager or what he's going to go be with the $8 million he takes. Like, do you have any strong feelings or emotions about that?
Strong opinions about him. I don't think so. You're right. There's not a lot of background. He rises to the top quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have any strong takes. What about you?
I mean, I kind of expressed everything in just defining it. Like, it is interesting that he is our hero, but that's what's interesting. Is he our hero? He's our titular character, but, like, who is he? Is he good or bad? I feel like I'm on his side because I love the film very strongly, and I love the changes that he brings to Truth and Soul, because that made the film happen and I loved it, but I don't know who he is or what he's about, which is where I find it interesting. I don't feel like there's a criticism to be made there, but I do wonder what that speaks to, I guess, about maybe what Robert was trying to say, because I feel like there is something of interest or of quality there to be lensed in on.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I will confess that I think my critical faculties were diminished as this thing went along in terms of following his arc. Initially he is very sort of morally righteous about not wanting to market certain products and that kind of thing. And I think that maybe starts to slip away towards the end.
He signs. The thing is that it doesn't disappear. He acts like it does. Yeah. So the ending essentially is he agrees to market all those things and they give him the money. Then he goes to take the money from the vault and he's testing his group when he tells them that he's going to do that. And they all say no. Then when he goes to get his money, they've all changed their mind.
Mm-hmm.
he's leaving. He's not going to do that. He was kind of, I feel like, testing them, but then he doesn't judge them or anything. Mm-hmm. He says, split it between you. He says, don't give any money to 2 or 3 people. And then he makes off with the cash. And then they all fight over it. And it gets burnt.
Yeah. Maybe that's partly why I was hesitant to give this a perfect score, was only because I was so focused on just like the particulars of, you know, the comedy from scene to scene, that I found myself thinking less about Putney's transformation, because I was too busy wondering, like, why is Mimeo wearing that helmet? There are too many other details that are getting my attention.
See, to me, this film is kind of a mixed media piece in which it is live action, but it is absolutely and completely influenced by cartoons, specifically the Looney Tunes. Like, to me, it is just so cartoonish, but also an adult version of a cartoon, that those absurdisms and, gosh, the consultant getting off the helicopter in the beginning with the briefcase handcuffed to him, so that he can tell them what people from the middle of America think when, or are, who they are when they drink beer. It means they have small dicks, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to sell them big dicks, essentially. And then they start spewing the lines of, this beer has a big head. It's big. It's a hard beer, you know. And then the elephant's gonna drink it. To me, there's a high level of almost vaudevillian comedy there, just continuously throughout. And vaudevillian comedy was adopted by the cartoons, specifically Looney Tunes. So I just saw a lot of like sincere transference there. And the fact that it doesn't try to make itself make sense, but tries to make you have fun the whole time and is beautifully framed, I think it is a fantastic looking picture. That just goes so far to where I would not give this film a perfect score, but it's a 97 to a 98 for me. So Letterboxd ratings, that's 5 stars. To me, there's very few films that I've ever given 5 stars that I would think that about. The New World is one of the only ones that comes to mind. Even The Dark Knight, I wouldn't give a perfect score to.
Yeah, it's way up there. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of Looney Tunes, I mean, I kind of think slapstick. I don't know that I would have described this as slapstick. I think a lot about like the verbal wit of it. Mm-hmm. That line, there is a scene where Putney's in a car and they're getting swarmed by some media, some paparazzi, and he fires off like 5 one-liners in a row. You know, something like, you know, did you sleep with someone other than your wife? And or did you sleep with your wife or this other woman? And he says, not a wink. There's all kinds of just, you know, just sharp
throwaway one-liners that are amazing. Yeah. No, I would agree. I think that just with my personal background with the older Looney Tunes, specifically in the 1940s Looney Tunes, especially when there was like anti-racial sentiments depicted in those cartoons, I got a lot of transference out of those, mainly because those are my number one cultural key in to the history that this film is reflecting upon.
Yeah, makes sense.
Do you have a favorite scene?
I think my biggest laugh was Putney explaining to that guy why he can't give him a raise. That would have to be it. What about you?
My favorite is just that line that I told you reminds me of Dolomite Is My Name. Put some bread on it. And just him randomly during that conversation saying, bread, get some bread on it. Bread. What about that bread?
Lots of good stuff.
This is a film about securing the bag, essentially. I love it. I would highly recommend it. I believe it's free on YouTube. It's also free on Tubi. I don't know how legal the YouTube one is. I just saw it when I Googled the trailer. So maybe stick to Tubi, but that's at your discretion, listener.
Word. Until next time.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can.